By the early afternoon of 14 June 1800, the French army of Italy was in full retreat. Its forward divisions had been driven back more than a mile. Entire units were exhausted, disorganized, and short of ammunition. Many battalions had been reduced to a fraction of their strength. Other French casualties lay scattered across the vineyards and farmsteads east of Marengo. Wounded men crowded the roads to the rear. Stragglers drifted eastward in growing numbers. By any conventional measure, the battle had been lost. Yet by nightfall the same army would stand victorious. The cost of this victory was immense. Nearly a quarter of the French army became casualties, killed, wounded, or captured. The Austrians suffered even more severely. More than a third of their force was lost, including thousands taken prisoner during the final collapse. Despite the outcome, the battle was not a model of flawless command. In truth, Napoleon Bonaparte came closer to defeat at Marengo than at almost any other moment in his career. His dispersal of forces based on faulty intelligence left his army dangerously exposed. His belief that the Austrian commander would retreat proved mistaken. For much of the day, Napoleon was absent from the battlefield, unaware of the scale of the crisis unfolding to the west. Had events continued along their natural course, the French army would likely have been driven from the field and the campaign in Italy brought to a disastrous end. What saved it was not a single decision, but a combination of discipline, endurance, and chance. French infantry units, outnumbered and battered, held their ground for hours against overwhelming pressure. Officers rallied shattered formations again and again. Cavalry charges bought precious minutes. Artillery was fought to the last round. And above all, there was the arrival of Louis Desaix. Desaix had spent the morning marching away from the battlefield, attempting to cut off an Austrian retreat that never came. Delayed by flooded rivers and poor roads, he was hours behind schedule. Only at midday did Napoleon's desperate message reach him. Without hesitation, Desaix turned his division around and marched toward the sound of the guns. When he arrived on the field in the early evening, he found the French army retreating in disorder. Morale was low. The situation appeared beyond recovery, yet the presence of fresh troops, steady, disciplined, and unbroken, transformed the atmosphere almost instantly. Exhausted soldiers halted. Officers regrouped their men. A final stand became possible. Napoleon later claimed the decision to counterattack as his own. In reality, it was desperation as much as design. The Austrians, convinced they were pursuing a beaten enemy, had advanced without cohesion. Units were spread out. Command had fractured. Momentum had outpaced control. When the French counterattack struck, it did so with shocking suddenness. Desaix led his men forward personally. Moments later, he was killed, shot through the heart at the height of the advance. His death electrified his troops. Cries of vengeance rang out. The French line surged forward once more. A decisive cavalry charge shattered the Austrian flank and it spread through the advancing columns. Thousands threw down their arms. Others fled blindly toward the Bormida crossings. In a matter of minutes, victory turned into catastrophe. For the Austrian commander, General Melas, the reversal was almost incomprehensible. Earlier that afternoon, convinced the battle was won, he had relinquished command and returned to Alessandria. A fall from his horse had provided a convenient excuse to withdraw from the field. When news of the collapse reached him, the situation had already spiraled beyond recovery. Austrian units were scattered and retreating. Prisoners crowded the roads. With little room left to maneuver, Melas sought time. He proposed a ceasefire, ostensibly to recover the wounded and bury the dead. Napoleon refused unless negotiations followed. Over the following days, the two sides agreed to an armistice. Austria undertook to evacuate Piedmont, Genoa, and Lombardy. Northern Italy passed once more under French control. The political consequences were immense. Marengo secured Napoleon's position as first consul. In Paris, critics who had doubted his judgment were silenced overnight. A defeat would almost certainly have ended his career, and perhaps the consulate itself. Victory transformed him into the unchallenged master of France. Even more significant was the psychological impact of the battle. Saved at the last moment, against overwhelming odds, Napoleon became convinced that fortune favored him personally. Chance and audacity, he believed, were forces he could command. That belief would shape every decision he made in the years to come. Later that year, another French army inflicted a crushing defeat on Austria at Hohenlinden. With its forces beaten in both Italy and Germany, Austria sued for peace. The Treaty of Luneville followed. France's frontier advanced to the Rhine. French influence in Italy was formally recognized. Giant republics were secured, and Piedmont was soon annexed. France now stood larger and stronger than at any time since the reign of Charlemagne. Only one enemy remained: Great Britain. British naval power had proven decisive overseas, and the North Sea demonstrated that French dominance had limits. Yet on land, no coalition remained capable of resisting French armies. Europe was exhausted by nearly a decade of war. After months of negotiation, peace was concluded, the first in 10 years. How long it would last, no one could say. The Battle of Marengo was not Napoleon's most skillfully commanded victory, nor was it the result of careful planning alone. It was a battle won by endurance, sacrifice, and a single moment of opportunity seized at the last possible instant. A day that began in confusion and near disaster ended in triumph. And in doing so, it reshaped the fate of France and the destiny of Napoleon Bonaparte himself.